That's good. Time keeps on slipping, slipping, slipping into the future. Time keeps on slipping, slipping, slipping into the future. I want to fly like an osprey to the sea. Fly like an osprey, let my spirit carry me. I want to fly like an osprey till I'm free. Lord, to the revolution, peace. I don't have enough to eat. Shoe the children, no shoes on the feet. How's the people living in the street? Oh, there's a solution. I want to fly like an osprey to the sea. Fly like an osprey, let my spirit carry me. I want to fly like an osprey till I'm free. Oh, to the revolution. Time keeps on slipping, slipping, slipping into the future. Time keeps on slipping, slipping, slipping into the future. I want to fly like an osprey to the sea. Fly like an osprey, let my spirit carry me. I want to fly like an osprey till I'm free. Oh, to the revolution. Time keeps on slipping, slipping, slipping into the future. Time keeps on slipping, slipping, slipping into the future. Time keeps on slipping, slipping, slipping into the future. Time keeps on slipping, slipping, slipping into the future. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the pilot episode of Protect the Nest, the show inspired by you, our viewers and subscribers, because of the popular demand for some information, authentic information on what we can do
to help protect our loved ones from the dangers expressed on the other shows hosted by Neighborhood News. My name is John Wilkins. Running the boards today is Tyrone Sargent, and our hosts for today's show are Carol McIntosh. Welcome, Carol.
Hi, John. It's really wonderful to be here. I think we have a wonderful show coming up, and we'll start probably with some introductions. But basically, we're all mothers. Some of us, two of us, are grandmothers. And so time keeps on slipping into the future, and things are changing really fast. And there seem to be issues that we're all seeing in our communities. And we're all from really different communities. I think not only do we represent moms and grandmas, but we represent our country. We have, I'm from the Pacific Northwest, and Tara is from the New England.
Yep.
And we have Amber from the South. She's representing the South. And you're from the Midwest. So we kind of have a big geographic area here. And maybe we could start by everybody could introduce themselves a little bit.
Amber, go ahead.
Yeah, Amber.
Okay. Well, I have 2 young boys. One's 7 and one is 10. I've been married this August, will be 21 years. So I'm surrounded by testosterone. I love it, but it also helps me tap into my feminine side, and very much so brings out the maternal side in me, which is why every day I wake up and my first priority is to protect my nest and to know what's going on, and to know what's going on with each member of my family, even our dog and our tortoises, and our fish, and to really pay attention to what I can do to make sure that everyone is centered, everyone's needs are met, and that they feel heard and loved, so that then we do better in the world rather than contribute to many issues that we see taking place. And I know that some days we will be some of those that will cause an issue or a reverberation that doesn't quite meld well with society. But I think what's good about protecting your nest is knowing where your birds are about to fall out, or whether they're ready to fly, or whether they are learning to socialize properly, or they're learning how to fend off predators and things that can actually harm your nest, your family. And being in Atlanta, there's always something new going on. We try to look at the positive side as much as possible. And when we find something negative, we try to address it. That means going to city council. That means going to the Capitol. That means letting our voice be heard and not afraid to defend our nest.
That's right.
Tara, go ahead.
Okay, well, hello, everybody. Tara here. I'm so excited to be doing this show, Protect the Nest, with my sisters and my brothers. Everyone's welcome. And I think that we all know that the mama bears have awakened. And, we are not going to stand down. But when you mess with one baby bear, one mama bear comes. But now we are literally the nest, because we need to, like Amber said, we need to wake up and feel that level of protection to our closest, those that are, in our direct family, and other families. So we have a really position of unification. And I think that culture, society, like you just said, actually should be following the nests rather than the other way around, So I think that culture actually starts in the family, and I think we need to keep it that way. And we're not going to stand for these poisons that are out there. We're going to face them head on. We're going to discuss it. We're going to find some middle ground. We don't need to all think the same thing. As a matter of fact, we don't want to all think the same thing. But, I think that friends, perceived enemies, anybody who's anybody to you ospreys, new people joining the channel. We're going to make this a platform for everyone to put their 2 cents and to, not be afraid to have a conflicting view with someone else. We invite that. So welcome, everybody.
Well,
For those of you-
I
Go ahead.
guess I'll introduce myself a little bit too. I'm a grandmother of kids ranging from 50s to 30s. There's not a lot of them, just a couple, but I have grandkids ranging from their 20s to high school to a tiny 1-year-old. So there's a big range here. We've had a multi-generational family since my dad came to live with us before my youngest daughter was born. And so that multi-generational focus on the family is really interesting. I think we live in our own nest, but there's a nested nest too. There's a bigger nest. There's our neighborhood, our community, our cities, our states, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And our nest is also Mother Earth. I think Jesse, in the thing that was just on before us, was talking about his guest that went into the sweat lodge, and who he was confused. He was native, but he was kind of lost. And when he first went in there, he realized that the way to change everything was to change within himself, and he felt that deeply. And so I think the protecting the nest, we start within ourselves, and then we can help our nest and we can help our community. And the changes that we do internally are also reflected. I mean, we know we live in a fractal universe, and that all the fractals are different and unique and nested, but they affect each other. The big affects the little, and the teeniest affects the big. So that's why we're here together. We're here to do this, to change our understanding, our knowledge, and how can we be effective to help make those changes? It's so confusing. All these people won't listen to us. If we say one word wrong, we're cut off, or shamed. So it's time to address those issues. How can we talk about this so people can hear it? I think that's where we want all of our perspectives. We can listen to each other. Has that worked for you? How can we troubleshoot getting our message out to all our nests?
Yeah, for our newer viewers, I just want to point out that our producer, Tyrone Sargent, is also a musician, and he was working on a new song a couple of weeks ago. And as he was coming up with the words, he asked me, "What is to survive?" And if we know there's going to be changes in this world the next few years, and many changes, and some of them drastic. But what do we want to protect? What do we want to survive? Especially as America, for our viewers who are American citizens, what are we looking to bring out of the old and to keep and maintain in the world going forward? That's a question that I think each of us needs to address.
Yeah, and I think that one important thing that we were talking about the other night is that we don't have all the answers right now. We've all learned a lot over these past few years, a lot, but this is a work in progress. We all have kind of these challenges we're up against, communication challenges, like Carol mentioned. And so we're going to be working these things out all together.
Well, I think one of the things that I want to survive is humanity. And I think that's what's at risk right now. It's our humanity, that we're actual humans, that we work from our heart, that we love each other, and to be masked, to be inside, to be, disconnected is not it's not helping us get into the future the way that we would like to get into the future. So how do we exert our vision that it counteracts these messages that have become so pervasive? And I think Amber, you mentioned about people being hypnotized. I think that's a big thing to address.
Yes, I find that I'm the kind of person that when I'm around a group of people, I tend to gravitate towards someone who's struggling or having an issue or feeling left out or feeling unheard. And I automatically, because I'm someone who roots for the underdog, and I feel like if I watch someone struggle, then and I don't do anything or try to help gently, then when I'm struggling, no one's going to be there for me. And I find that tends to be selfish, but it keeps me in line. So although my thoughts are, well, I need to help this person because when I need help, I need someone there for me. Utterly, that's like I'm doing it because so I can receive it later, but it keeps me focused to address these issues. And I'm trying to teach my children to do the same, so that, I tell them each year if they have a new kid at the school or anyone they find out that's new, friend them, have the first couple weeks lunch with them, sit with them, check on them, introduce them to other people that you think have their same personality type. And when you see them flourish with other friends, back away just a little to see if they have wings or if they're going to go and find their tighter group, but then always be there for them because you've just added another friend and someone else that will care for you and will be there for you during difficult times. And even if they're not, it's just the right thing to do. And we try to do that, but it's a balance because a lot of times you can find your whole life being centered around helping the underdog or helping people who are struggling or people who tend to be hypnotized or just follow and sink into whatever is being repeated lockstep, and they find that they're doing it's very challenging at times because if you're always leaning in on those who need help, and especially today when we're dealing with lots of people with trauma, you can lose yourself. So we've had to have a couple of family meetings to say that it's okay to actually address your needs and to step out to lead. Because if you're just constantly addressing someone else's pain and you're looking to help, you're not showing how to move without getting caught up in the trauma, in the hypnotism, where people can find their way. And I always say, like, if you're struggling with a conversation with your friends and they're in this rut of everything's negative, look at a tree and say, oh my gosh, how many different birds do you think live in there? And I try to pick kid conversations where then each kid is like, no, I think it's this, I think it's this. And all of a sudden, everyone has their own opinion. And then you've kind of broke out of that. Everyone has the same opinion. And then every time someone says something different, laugh and go, oh, I love that. Oh, I love that too. So that each person feels like, hey, I feel empowered by having my own opinion. So it's very hard with 7 and 10-year-olds. You have to pick very simple subjects. But I find that what Carol just mentioned about the hypnotism, it's so hard to deal with right now. And I think a lot of women who are nurturing and trying to may not understand that there's a hypnotic part to it and may just get flustered and frustrated. And I'm hoping it doesn't cause them to want to drink or be depressed or zone out and go into a hole instead of, knowing what to do because that's how we were made. We are actually naturally made to heal a situation, to address it, to address a boo-boo, to address okay, we've got an issue here. What do I do? But when there's chaos all around, women, we struggle. And
well, Amber,
yeah.
I can ask you a question about that hypnosis. Have you found any little conversation snippets or ways that are like snapping your fingers that helps people kind of open their eyes and see something other than just the parroting the narrative, I guess,
Yeah. I usually tell a story about something that personally happened to me, because if I tell a story that happened to someone else or that I think they should look out for, they automatically are like, what are you trying to convince me of? But if I tell them, usually it's something that's not so, great looking about what I've done. So it's something where it's a bit degrading, or I look up, I mention how stupid I felt. And, so I'll take whatever example of that I see that, if it's children need to wear masks and they need to be vaccinated and they need to be boosted and we need to do this. My major issue is, I hear what you're saying. The other day, I caught myself listening to talking heads telling me every which way, every channel I turned to. And then I went to the regular reporters and then I even went to Snopes, and they were even saying not to listen to regular news. And so I just went straight to the CDC website, and I saw that it actually says that it's only in an experimental use for children. Children don't really get harmed from this unless they have severe comorbidities, and a very small percentage of children have died, and it was during the time when their PCR test couldn't determine if it was just COVID or if it was pneumonia with flu or COVID. So I caught myself doing what I always do, listening to people who get paid a narrative to tell you through commercials, and I trust it. Why don't I just go and look at the source, exactly what they're saying? And, I catch myself doing that all the time. Here, let me give you the link, because I'll just resort to what is the news telling me. But, there's a stark difference with what the news is telling you and what the CDC is recommending, which, that took me a while to figure out, but I'm glad I finally figured it out. And that's how I say it. So that then I show them the documents. I actually point out where what they're saying is the hyperbolic rhetoric they're hearing in this, and really hypnotic state of, this is what I have to do. This is what I have to do. And you can see the struggle on their face. They really are like, wait, that's not what the news is saying. The CDC said, I know. And I'm like, I know, I fall for that all the time. And then I'll say something to somebody, and I'll mention a friend that's a nurse, and I'm like, and then she'll get on to me, and I'm like, oh, I did it again. I'm so sorry. And then they feel like they can start doing that. And that I didn't pressure them because I made fun of my own situation, because it has happened to me.
Yeah, your example is really interesting because you pointed out about the emergency use authorization, and some of that work I was looking at earlier this week.
I will join in.
About what happened to Russia.
Hot mic, John.
Yeah. So what happened in Russia when everything disintegrated back in the early 90s or late 80s was an emergency use authorization. And that's what they were able to get Gorbachev out. They said he was sick. It caused all these, all the rules to be thrown out so the new people could kind of move in and bring in Yeltsin, who brought in Putin as a KGB guy. It was interesting because Bush was the CIA president, and then in comes soon after the KGB president of Russia. So that was interesting. But anyway, it's the EUA, I think, is the problem. The EUA, these emergency things that get around the law. So that's a sort of snap the fingers, wake up. We're still here 2 years later. Here we are in emergency use. So
Yes.
how about you, Tara?
I want to add something about sourcing, because we all have learned sourcing in a deeper way, in a deep dive kind of way, but that's one of the problems that the general public is lacking.
Mhm.
They don't realize, like, these names that are broadcasted and the symbols that are so trusted are like the toxic information, and even myself, I realized that I'm like, before I understood about the NIH, if you're looking up any health issue, if you go to look it up online, one of the first informations you get is the NIH, blah, 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 NIH, da, da, da. And it's not like they don't have good studies in there that you can get some information, but if you don't recognize what the NIH is, then you're not able to say, well, that has some good pieces, but this as a source is always pushing other things to the bottom of the list. And so people just need to start. That's one of the things, because we've been talking about, we're all on a mission to try to figure out how we can talk to people, how we can kind of tap into some level of communication. Carol, I feel like one of the most positive things I've heard breakthrough is your example of how you had some friends who actually were asking you, because of the confusion right now, what you thought about current events. And those people had, you said before, been kind of like putting you in a category where they weren't listening to you. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And so I was able to point them to, well, you can look up the Azov Brigade, who is the one that's the most financed in the Ukraine, on Wikipedia, which is one of the trusted news initiatives, I think. So on the Wikipedia article, you scroll down and it talks about the Nazi roots, the Nazi philosophy, a big section on Nazism. So there it is. And it's in the New York Times. And Time Magazine even did an article last summer about Nazism of the Azov Brigade. So it's something that's talked about in the trusted news media that you can gently point to, or with sources.
You probably got to go back a little bit though, because currently they'll change that. But if you go to the older articles, you can see that without them knowing what was coming, they were really reporting on that.
I haven't looked at it this week, but last week it had the big section on Nazism. If you looked up Azov Brigade, that's where you saw it, right in the Wikipedia. But a lot of people don't trust Wikipedia because it changes.
Right.
It does.
Again, just recognizing what your source is. You don't have to completely cut it out, but if you're looking at it without a stink eye, you're going to run into trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Agree.
One thing that I want to comment on is there's a really great analogy to gardening and natural pesticides. Okay, so if we as a people are or let's just take the garden first, right? If you have a garden and you grow the same type of tomato in the whole garden, right? If you have a pesticide that comes and breaks the genetic code to that tomato, it pretty much just wiped out your whole garden in one punch, okay? And however they get people into these spells, one of the purpose is this group think. So the group think is just like that garden of just one genetic, because they can put out one message and boom, it's everywhere. It reaches every spot all at once. It's just like a poison let in, If you have a garden, and this relates to people having their own perspective, their own point of view. If you have, all different vegetables, even different types of the same vegetables, then when these germs come in, they need to individually crack each code, and they can't just wipe out this whole garden. And so if you relate it to us and communications, if we all retain our own perspectives and don't let these things change us from, then these poisons have to go in and make sense going through everybody. They can't just like wipe everybody out all at once. So one of the healthiest things that we can do is, retain our own viewpoint. But at the same time, for a healthy viewpoint, you have to be willing to let in new information and sometimes it changes an earlier perspective, and that needs to be okay. I know we know that, but this is.
Tara brings up a good point that I first saw it in my own neighborhood about 7 years ago. The idea that groupthink was a thing, and it really didn't matter which group you were in. Your tendency was to not risk being ostracized from your group. Mm-hmm. That fear of being ostracized keeps people from, even if they nurture ideas which are contrary to the average or to the what the majority of the group think, they are very hesitant to voice them. And that became one of my biggest issues. How is this groupthink working? How is it taking hold so fast over such large segments of the population?
I can give you an example of how you can kind of break the group think. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you have someone there that is controlling the narrative, and that's really what it is, setting the tone and controlling the narrative. And the minute you can tell when someone becomes, when someone around you is controlling it, because the very minute that you introduce a different tone and a different narrative, they become dismissive, argumentative, interruptive, and go straight back to that narrative, and will circle it around to hit it again. Here's an example. So in early 2018, we had someone from the CDC die here in Atlanta, Timothy Cunningham. He went missing, and his neighbors were looking for him, searching for him. He lived about 1.5 miles down the street from me. I have a friend who lived right across the street from him, and it wasn't normal for him to disappear. He had just spent time at Morehouse College with his friends. His sister lives not too far away. His parents live in Virginia. They're a military family. He traveled all over the place, and there was a certain narrative that it looked like people bigger than just our local news and our local police were allowed to discuss. And I could tell that early on. I wasn't sure if it was the CDC or if it was a higher entity than that. So when anyone would try to bring up something like, well, maybe someone kidnapped him because he works for the CDC and he's in a military outfit sometimes. Well, the news and the police and the CDC joined together to change that narrative. They did not want that narrative out there. They did not want anybody to talk about it, think about it. So they came out and said, no, he wasn't feeling well. There's no truth to that. There's nothing. Well, every time we dealt with it, we got shut down. Finally, they find his body. And then a little later, they call a neighborhood meeting kind of around the same area. I show up to the neighborhood meeting. The police chief is there. She's discussing crime, how crime has gone down. It hadn't gone down. We were listening to numbers. And then I stood up and I said, I have a question. And I changed the narrative to what it needed to be, not what they allowed us to hear. And I said, when Timothy Cunningham's parents came down here to look for his body, they had to go and view 2 bodies before his that looked like him, that would have died, and their body would have been the same decomposition stage that he would have been. And neither one of them were him. So if in the search they found 2 people that looked like him, how many did they find that didn't look like him? So do we have a serial killer or an issue? Because I'm finding that statistically, in the map in which I've seen the search has gone on, to find 2 bodies that would be similar to Timothy's, to have his parents come up and view that body to find out it wasn't his until they saw the 3rd body, does not seem like we don't have an issue. Were there more bodies found? And you could tell every official there was angry. And I knew that minute, okay, they want to change the narrative back. She stood up. She said, we don't have a serial killer. There's no truth in any of that. And you know what? I'm discussing the numbers and the crime has gone down and blah, blah, blah. But after the meeting, a bunch of people, neighborhood people, came up to me to ask me for that information, to ask me for that link. And I said, let's have a meeting, an NPU meeting. Let's have our regular neighborhood meeting where we just all talk. That way we could share information, but they were mad. And soon after that, the city called and said, would you like to be on a task force for crime? Because they wanted to be able to feed me a narrative because I felt left out, or they assumed I felt left out. And if I was part of the group, I would then feed the narrative that I was fed because I was special, because I was part of the group. However, I tend to tick off everybody, no matter what side of the aisle that they're on. And I'm a rule follower. I'm a rule follower. I believe in the rule of law. But if I feel like I'm being lied to, I will challenge that. And I tend to be a pain because both sides of the aisle do lie. And sometimes they say it's for our own good. Okay, fine. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be able to challenge that. So there are ways to do it. And you can tell if people received it. But you're going to have to expect that people are immediately going to try to grab them back and rechange the narrative. And so there's a lot of tricks that I guess they just naturally understand that people don't naturally understand. And I think that's the trick, is getting people to be empowered enough to see that there's a narrative and to actively change it. Sometimes use comedy. That's really good too. That helps a lot.
Well,
Yeah.
Amber,
Comic relief.
your story of, that there's these dead bodies decomposing right there, brings up an issue of part of what we're kind of being fed is that, we're being degraded as humans. There's all this degradation stuff, including drugs and gun violence and the idea that humans are, they're selfish, they're greedy, they're corrupt, and that the problem is humans. But Tyrone, do you have a little bit of that picture? I'm thinking about the drugs and the guns right now, and I sent Tyrone a little video of Seattle or Portland. Maybe do you have that queued up, or if not, we can just talk about it. I don't know. I'm not hearing anybody.
Tara, you're on mute.
Oh, I was going to say, I have the feeling they're checking into that together now.
Okay. Yeah. Well, anyway, the idea of stepping over dead bodies, which I think you showed that video of kids, people walking by a kid that had fallen in a gym, a crowded gym full of people. And we see that in our cities every day. Every day there's all these people, and it's not like before World War II in the 30s. It's different because it's really has to do with drug use and addiction. And the needles. I mean, it's just a horrible, horrible vision that any of us that live near a city sees all the time. And it's easy not to see it too. It's easy to just not look there. But one of the things that I think can make people snap their fingers is to understand that it wouldn't be like this if there wasn't serious corruption at the top. And nobody's really looking at that. We just assume, corruption's always been there, but it hasn't been like this. In our memory, it hasn't been like this. It's something very, very different. Yes. So, I think that can be another snap your fingers kind of thing, is to just point that out. People don't realize that the money that's being generated from all this drug sales that's degrading humanity is propping up, the stuff we see in Ukraine and BlackRock and Blackwater. And, it's time to really look at that as communities. What can we do locally? Point the fingers and start that dialogue. Because it's,
Carol, a lot of people talk about the level of corruption in Chicago during the 20s and 30s, when there were, hundreds of millions of dollars on the line. Now we're talking about trillions of dollars.
Yeah.
And for somebody it's unfathomable how much power we're talking about, and how much they're willing to make people bend to their way, to their will, in order to get things done.
I think most people just can't, they can't imagine that it's the people in power and the leaders that are allowing this to happen, even though in Chicago, everybody knew the cops were compromised, the politicians were compromised, and that's how that happened. But they're just not quite willing. And part of it is, you see something like the Hunter Biden scandal, and it's like, don't look at the power corruption and what money is going funneled right to our leaders, but look at the crack pipe on the girl. Look at the purient interest. It's like, look over here, not at the big picture. Look at the, well, this is yucky. We can get rid of him like we did Epstein.
Delicious.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. I think, Tara, you talked about cultural poison.
Yeah, I definitely, this cultural poison thing, we were talking about kind of what's going on with schools. It's not limited to there, certainly not, but it's one of the most urgent areas for people to recognize this cultural poison, because when they're trying to get the next generations and try to get them to, they don't have a life experience to recognize freedoms that were lost. And again, it really speaks to what you're saying about always thinking that, like, oh, the people that are already assembled in the school board must have the best thing in mind. Of course, there wouldn't be any lunatics getting in there or anything, you know. And so even with the drugs, you know, instead of just like a bag man, it's like a bag group. It's like, oh, these poor people, they just couldn't make it in life. Oh, it's their fault, you know. But it's like, you know, just like they did with the poor neighborhoods, you know, or poor Black neighborhoods, or any poor neighborhood, where it's like, oh, these poor people, they just can't, they have to resort to a life of crime. Oh, well, but it's like, where is this stuff coming from? You know, it's like these methods don't just like appear in neighborhoods without some funding, without some serious planning, you know. So we can look back at like the drugs and right up to everything happening now, and it's just layered on by this same actually smaller group of people. Like, they're big, but they're big in money and power, but they're not big in other ways. So we need to reduce them to the petty tyrants that they are. And like Amber was saying, when people are suffering and they have succumbed to certain things in our society, we need to not blame them and care for them. And like, that doesn't mean that you're going to be able to address every, you know, the homeless problem, but recognizing how we got here, I think is like a key starting point.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, you were talking about how those it started in the Black communities, and we know now, looking back, that J. Edgar Hoover did that on purpose. You know, that crime and drugs started there, but now it's everywhere. It is everywhere.
It spreads. That's the thing. They set it up, and then, you know, go ahead, destruction, take over. And
I'm not sure it would spread naturally. I think it's spread on purpose, and that we have to look to, you know, the BlackRock and the Vanguards. How is that money, you know, being funneled into, you know, the armies? You know, it's being recycled into dangerous patterns, and nobody's looking at that.
One of the things that after I noticed that they were learning how to target groups of people, just and allowing those people to make their own decisions, to say, well, there's nothing we can do about it. And I think it's important for everyone to watch the Utopian Mouse Experiment. It's a video on YouTube, and it talks about scientists that put these mice in a rats in a rat city. Okay. So they couldn't get out. They were stuck. And tell me how this sounds familiar. Mm-hmm. They couldn't get out. All their food was provided. They didn't have to look for it. They didn't have to earn it. It was provided for them each day. Their shelter was provided for them each day. And then they put a lot of rats in there, and they watched. And they labeled certain rats, like you had the beautiful ones. They sat there and groomed themselves all day. You had the ones that were the breeders that were impregnated and raped, and they stuck to a little corner. And when you watch it, it literally is what they did when they created ghettos and projects. Mm-hmm. And then they do that, you know, because it's so kind to let people over the border, right? It's so beautiful and kind. But then they're put in ghettos and projects and glommed into a small area. And then everything is given to them. They hit, and it was called group sync. That's how they found out how they could figure out how these things, how they could get certain personality types. But what was crazy is it affected them genetically so much that the last survivors, they let out, but that same behavior continued, because everywhere they went, even when given opportunities to have freedom, to earn their money, to do really anything, they resorted to the same survival instincts that they did in the experimentation. And watching that shows you that long ago how they watched animals in a situation where everything was provided for them. So if we understood that we have been watched, every race, every group, to see what triggers us. And this is something I want to mention, and then I want to hear what you guys think about it. So remember, the pandemic starts. Everybody's at home. So everybody has the news on, of course. And everyone's listening to press conferences, of course. And this is where I found out Fauci was full of shenanigans and understood psychologically how to trigger Trump and how to get what he wanted and to look like he was not the one who did it. So he was standing in the background, and they were announcing what they found out a little bit more about the virus because their scientists have been on it. And Fauci talks, and he mentions how the virus is affecting the Black community more than anybody. About that time, he knew it would trigger Trump to be more competitive because people had already been calling Trump a racist. So Trump wants to get up there, and he wants to like push, and you can see on the video, he's moving Fauci out of the way so he can get up there and he can address it. And he's like, we need to be careful. It's affecting Black people. And he goes on and on and on to try to reiterate how much he's not racist and he really cares and he wants to do something. Almost a week and a half, George Floyd happens. Now you've got tons and tons of Black Americans out on the street. They knew how to trigger them emotionally to the point where when anybody wanted to go back to work, they were convinced you wanted to kill them because they were told that this virus hits them worse than anybody else, which made them want to be inside. And anybody who tried to keep the economy going, in which they needed the economy to go, so the goods and services would be well, and the country wouldn't go into debt while we're dependent upon government, but that it would cause a division, and that would allow for riots to take off in the street. And then they would end up pairing with people that they normally wouldn't in order to gain numbers to get them out on the street to push for a big change. And I was always wondering, like, if they're afraid that it affects them more, why are they out in the street? But then I understood that when you have watched the rats in the experiment, right? You've watched, what triggers the white community? What triggers the Black community? What triggers the Latino community? You're going to say those things over and over and over and over. And then you're going to show something traumatic over and over. George Floyd's being killed. And then they're going to feel like they have to get out on the street. It's desperate time. People are trying to kill them all over the place. They don't have any answers. So take it away. But like, that's how deceptive some of these people are that study psychology. They knew exactly how to trigger the president and the whole United States of America. And it worked. And it triggered people all over the world.
Well, one of the things I noticed about that happening was that it was all over the world at the same time. And we've read that Rockefeller program that called it lockstep. And now you're hearing that word out. It's coming back. I think Biden has mentioned lockstep. And I think when you bring that up, that everything happens all the same all over the world, it can do a little finger snap for people like, oh, well, hey, how did that happen? Clearly there's some orchestration involved when you point that out. So that might be another little, just get the finger snaps going to as you can. We can't really confront our loved ones straight up because of all the language that's triggered,
Well, that's one of the things where I am at, one of the many angles that I have, but there's been people that I just haven't had a real conversation with in a few years because I want to be able to preserve my relationships for the future. So it's like a huge challenge because it's like the less we communicate, the less we understand each other. But it's like if we have a full-on communication, we can run the risk of having a total blowout and making it worse.
Yes, I agree. It's hard. It's so hard.
Walking on eggshells, as they say.
Yes. And I'm not one to do that. And I've been doing that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's killing me.
It's hard, but like you have to also it's so nuanced, right? Because you want to be respectful, you want to keep communications open for later, but at the same time, you're not going to stand in the little circle either, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I got in a lot of trouble at the beginning, just kind of speaking my mind or trying to counter the arguments, and then realizing, oh, I'm losing my friends, and I want to keep that communication open. So yeah, it is nuanced and challenging. That's
And
for sure.
I want to ask them. I want to say, do you notice that we can't even talk like? Do you notice that you like? I have no idea. I try to figure this out every day. But wouldn't you just say that if I'm not thinking normal, if I can't go to my friend and say, well, why did you think that? Like, if you can't do that, like, what? That's what kind of blows my mind. That's where I'm at anyway. My
Yeah, it
challenge.
makes me feel like we have fallen for the division trap. And then I try to look for language that would, so I try to think of like, what do they look, news sources do they watch? What is it that they're interested in? And what can I find that I'm trying to say that those trusted sources they go to are saying too? So anytime I see if they watch MSNBC, I type in searches of what I'm trying to say. So if I'm trying to say they're saying that masks aren't doing anything, and I'm going to type in where I know they get their news, and I'm going to go in the search bar, and I'll be able to find an article.
Mhm.
And then I say, oh my gosh, did you see this? They're like, oh, are you kidding me? Oh, when are they going to know what to do? I'm so stressed. Like, me too, girl. I don't know what to do, but I feel like the more information I get, I got to break out of this algorithm. So I'll literally, and then I'll go on all these websites I don't even listen to, that I wouldn't want to listen to. And I listen to all of them to see, are they totally divided? Do they believe the same on this? And that's the only way I can approach them, but it's few and far between because it's been so hostile. So anytime I have that moment, I'm like, oh, I had to break through. It was a little one, but they might change their mind in 2 weeks.
That's
But
a
I
great
tried.
approach. Great approach. I
Yeah.
never even thought of that.
One tip that I picked up, and I've carried it pretty far, is that I choose, for example, one of my neighbors is a huge Huffington Post reader, and I picked a topic that I knew was not very controversial. Like kids who are playing on sports teams, they can't wear a mask, or they have to wear a mask. So I took an issue that wasn't controversial between us, and I said, I saw in Huffington Post this great article, and she said, oh yeah, I saw that too. And then I said, and I saw another article on Huffington Post about Igor Kolomoisky. Did you see that? No, I didn't see that. In fact, there wasn't anything about Kolomoisky, but the fact that I saw it on Huffington Post, now she has to go look up Igor Kolomoisky.
Bingo.
Later.
That's a good one. I need to use that. Thank you. I'm going to write it down.
You have to say, find common ground first, and get them. Oh yeah, this guy's really on it. He knows what he's talking about because he reads the same sites that I do. And then you get in some information that they have to go research.
It's like speaking a language, because even one language like English, right? Like, speaking of kids, like we were saying the other day, if you talk to a 5-year-old, you have a different language than talking to a 13-year-old, than talking to a 20-year-old, So that's the same kind of translation. You're like, let me tap into their language and where that they're at, their news sources, but whatever, and talk to them on their level, instead of trying to like keep talking in your way when they don't even understand what the flip you're even talking about, So I think translations across the board is something that we should always be considering. And I think that even includes art, because, just like the Da Vinci Code, right? Kind of thing. It's like there are stuff that can't be said at given times that will show up in the arts, and they slip through the times that way, and they're huge comms to us, positive and negative, because sometimes we discover creeps that way too.
Mm-hmm.
But just want to throw this one thing in there because on talking of the kids and just talking on, that's one of the most important angles, because a quote that I was saying the other night when we were discussing the show, and it's, I don't know who the quote is from, but it's very important. And it says something like, it's easier to raise healthy children than to fix broken men.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that we're not interested in fixing broken men. We are, but just like Amber said, we need to wake up each day and think, what are we doing for the younger people? And especially since, I know we all have very specific complaints right now, masks, vaccine, like all of it. And if we keep on fighting, if the adults are wasting all their energy fighting, they're not going to be focused enough on what the kids need, like some of these parents that probably later are going to be like, what was I thinking? They're busy trying to figure out their own confusion right now, and they don't notice, like, hey, maybe, just the kids, so it's huge in the nest, and you guys know that, but I just wanted to stress that fact.
Yeah, I did notice there was a recent post about homeschooling that was really interesting. I mean, I think that the school system has been a part of, this groupthink and all the pressures on it too. But the homeschooling has gone up from, a few thousand, not just a few years ago, to, what was it, 5 million, 50 million or some huge astronomical growth. So I think people are starting to realize that we do need to take care of our own nests, and even if it's difficult, even if it means sacrifices, we need to spend time with the people that matter.
And that includes school boards.
Yeah.
So I would suggest to anybody out there who is like, what can I do? If you're interested in joining a school board and you're interested in helping kids rather than hurting them, you don't need to be a parent to join. Obviously, it's one of the things that, and we've seen it happening, where these paid shill whatever come in, they're making decisions, and the town or city come in and look at each other and say, no, they're out of here. Kick them to the curb. If your school board's not working for you, get rid of them. Make a new one. We do not need to. These entities have proven themselves untrustworthy.
Agree. And that reminds me, we sent John a video and a way to approach people who just have a lot of trust and not enough questions. It's okay to trust, and it's okay to want to be part of a solution and to work together with a team, and to even consider, this is my country. I love my country. I love the people that live among me, the people that have come before me, the people that will be here after me. I love people that are from really anywhere, but what are we willing to deal with this trust? And the little video, the little TikTok that I sent to John, I shared it with a couple people last night, and they were like, oh my gosh, yes, that's so true. But they've actually been trusting every single thing. And they're like, oh yeah, when it's put that way, that kind of stings really bad. That was a lot of that did it. But I think it's because it was funny and she was funny that it made it so much easier to share. It's like, that's very, because you can't deny those things because they're not conspiracies, because they all actually came out. So it's and to give it with a little humor and it be something you're familiar with a song and what you grew up to, it made it a lot easier.
Here we go. Hey.
I'm going to go back to the school board issue for a minute.
Okay.
Everyone is gaining awareness of the fact that the school board is important, that everyone has to be involved now. But very few people know the laws in their state surrounding the officers, the election or appointment of school board officers. And I encourage everyone to get more informed on what those laws are, and also on patient rights. And you're talking about your elderly mother or father in the hospital, learn what the patient rights in your state are. Okay, Amber, Tyrone has pulled up this video, and do you want to play it now or hold off till later?
To you guys, just when you play it, make sure you enlarge it. I don't mind if it's an hour later. It's up to Carol and Tara.
I think we should play it now because I need a little break.
Butterfly in the sky, I can go twice as high. Take a look, it's in a book, a reading rainbow. I can go anywhere, friends to know and ways to grow, a reading rainbow. I can be anything. Take a look, it's in a book, a reading rainbow. 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 Butterfly in the sky, I can go to.
That was great.
That is great.
It's so perfect. I mean, it's just your brain goes into, if you have cognitive dissonance, your brain is going to be doing two different things there, and it's going to show the dissonance right in front of your face.
Yeah, and it's hard because you're like, I've complained about those things. I've read, oh, I can't believe that we dealt with this. And then you are introduced to things you hadn't heard of. Then you look it up and you're like, oh, it did happen. And then you see GMOs and you're like, I used to hate GMOs. Why am I now told that it's the only way we can feed hungry people? And so it just really slams you in the face. And then you understand it's not really one entity. It's a bunch of different people that pop up like popcorn. Oh, I did this because we needed money and we needed to have an unholy alliance with this group and this group. And oh, here's a different group and needed an unholy alliance with this group and this group because we were saying we needed to fear this country. And so it's not like this one entity did all of that and we were all just like cattle. There's different popcorns of like selfishness, arrogance, thievery, deception that pops up. The players change sometimes. But the problem is the people that allow it. And sometimes we're the ones that allow it without saying, this is absolutely unacceptable. We're not going to accept this. This is something remedial and ridiculous, and you're twisted, and we deserve better than this. We're your citizenry, and you either pick it up and you treat us decently, or you need to get out of that position because you don't know what the hell you're doing. It's taking that authority and saying, excuse me, I don't know who you think you are, but you're using my tax dollars to do this. So you need to zip it, move out of the way. You didn't have the authority. You didn't get the authority, and stop being deceitful. And if they were like, well, no, you're lying. If someone's lying that works in the government and you've got proof right there, stop lying. I need the truth. Stop lying. That is not what it says. And just be frank about this is what you're doing and it's not appreciative. Because when you're dealing with authority, if they feel like they can, like, if I tell my kids, they're like, can we go get an ice cream from the ice cream man? If I go, oh, well, they don't have any ice cream, they ran out. They're going to know. And they're going to, Mom, that's not even true. Oh, yeah, it is. Then I'm doubling down on my lies. And now they're never going to trust me when it comes to ice cream man. What I need to do is go, you haven't earned it if they haven't. But if they have, you have earned it. But I don't have any change on me. Why don't we do this, this, and this? You help me out on this. I'll go get us a couple gallons of ice cream and you each can choose one. It'll be almost the same price as getting it on the street. Do we have a deal? Because if not, you're going to have to use your allowance and go get an ice cream bar that's half the cost of a gallon of ice cream. So you make the choice, but don't get mad when you run out of money. And then I've given the options. I've said what I'm willing to do. But, in our house, we allow that debate to happen. But if I make a certain choice and they want to go against it, they're held 100% responsible for that. I'm not going to be held responsible for the fact that they ran out of their petty cash from their allowance and they want to use their money they put aside for charity for an ice cream. That's ridiculous that you put that money aside for charity. What are you doing? I'm questioning your logic on this. Now you can do it, but don't get upset when later you're wondering why you can't hand change to somebody, or I'm not going to help you go get the stuff that we pass out to the homeless. Like you're not going to get what it is that you're looking for later, and you can't live by your impulse right now. So I try to instill that in them, but I allow them to make the mistakes, because if I don't allow it now, they're never going to learn.
And plus that's full of brainstorming too, because we've all come together via George and his wonderful way of telling things that are not pleasant with a little pep in his step, a little hope in his heart, and yes, sometimes we need to listen to people, like, sometimes we're like, what do we, but I think it's a military thing. I don't know, but maybe it's just a philosophy thing. But there is something that's said that if you're going to lay a problem down, start laying down some solutions at the same time. And that doesn't, and like you just said, it's a brainstorming. It's something to work through. It doesn't mean that the first solution you come up with is going to be the perfect thing.
Yeah.
But I think that that's part of what puts people in such a fuzzy or depressed or can't move type thing, is that they hear all these problems and they don't understand a solution, right? And so we all have different ways of solutions. Obviously, philosophical ones and prayerful ones are some of the most easy to hit the heart of everyone at the same time. But we are in physical bodies and we have physical situations that we need to work out. And I think that there is, even some of the stuff we were talking about last night of like literally people losing their lives in this war. Okay. They're losing their lives in this war. And so we're not going to forget that. Okay. And so when we talk about, it's going to be okay because XYZ, that doesn't mean that in any way we're saying people aren't suffering. People haven't, really had a hard time getting to where we're at. And that's okay. That's why we have angels and stuff like that. But, the way that I see it, and I always keep a lot of space for the hope and what's going really well, is that what we are fighting right now, and when we win, this is going to bring in a quantum healing, a quantum system, a wave that has been on the horizon for a while now. We've felt, those of us that are feeling, we've felt it deep in our hearts. Okay. And so there are solutions that are coming. So just because we see the reading rainbow and we say, okay, it's like, we can do this. And just like any problem in our evolutionary process, once we understand more about the problem, once we can identify the parts to the problem and actually piece together solutions, then things that seemed really impossible start to work themselves out. And so that is where we're at.
I agree.
Tara, that you brought in before. I think that idea of that we're all part of the garden, and that, that things are always changing and they're always growing and they're always decomposing, but we need to be actively involved and be able to ask questions. I think not being able to ask questions has been what's frustrated us so much, that we get shut down when we make points and we just try to have, brainstorm that we so need right now. So that's a wonderful place maybe to kind of let us all brainstorm and figure out how can we do that in dialogue with the people that we have difficulty talking to. How can we bring that questioning?
That's a good point. That's a good point, Carol. We have to begin to wind it down now, but I want to just underline something that Amber said earlier. It's very important right now, more than ever before in our country's history, is dialogue. We have to keep the dialogue going, between neighbors, between friends at work. We have to keep dialogue open. Don't close any doors. Don't burn any bridges. and we need to maintain a positive spirit, because we know that how the deep state works, and we know that they're attacking us, especially with things like Pokemon Go. They're attacking us with everything. Psychologists are having a field day right now.
Oh, yeah.
So we have to be the ones that keep the calm, that keep people thinking, but to help keep them calm.
And hugging them. I think I love Jesse saying that a few days ago, that, hug people.
Yes.
Now that the masks aren't quite such a barrier, that we can do that, and we need that energetic collectiveness feeling.
What I've learned, and it was very hard at first, was to show vulnerability as a woman and a nurturer to my children and my husband. Because if you're always looking strong, you're teaching your child something impractical, a perfection that cannot be attained. And that when they need to show vulnerability to those closest to them, they have no idea what that looks like. And I've shown them that in different ways, where I'd look nervous, where I was stressed. I'm like, Mommy is stressed. She's got a lot on her mind, and I'm sorry. And just let me get through this. Okay, Mommy feels better. Did she hurt your feelings? Come here. Let's talk about it. And doing that, I found, has given the okay to my offspring to know you have to vent it out. You have to get it out in order to reset your body, your mind, and say, okay, I got all that toxic thought, all that stress, all that fear. It's out. And now I'm going to rebuild those around me and say, thank you for being there for me. Wow. You were the strongest brick wall for me. I felt like I could just open up and talk to you about anything. Now I'm going to be strong again. You built me back up. Let's go have fun. And that has taught them to communicate when they're frustrated or sad. And I think allowing our friends and even people we don't agree with to have that venting moment and ask if they're okay. And say, I'm here for you. I'm seeing it from a different perspective, but you don't need to worry about my perspective right now. You need to worry about you. What do you need from me? And that loyalty or that kindness causes them to be more open when they're in a time of weakness, where you can help them, but you can also guide them to things that they haven't had their mind open to yet.
Yeah. And you know what? I would just have to say, for me personally, as frustrating as it's been with people that I never thought wouldn't be able to talk to me, I feel like I'm probably not just talking for myself when I say that it has pushed us all out of our comfort zone. And that's kind of how us as a group, us as friends, real friends, and we see many other circles across the world right now being created because people were literally bumped out of their comfort zone. And so I think that's a huge silver lining for us, because I think that, in the face of that frustration, I wouldn't have had the experiences and gotten so close to so many people. Like, look at you guys, we're all in different states, and we have, so there's a huge silver lining for us to ride on.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think we have come together as a self-organizing group, and that's what you're talking about. That's how nature works, It's all self-organizing. It works by its own intelligence and its own heart, the feelings. So here we are doing it, and many other groups are too. And so everybody can do it. We don't have to be isolated. We don't have to be masked.
Nope.
Yes.
Okay, everyone, please tune in again next week, Friday from 2 to 4 at neighborhoodnews.com. And please support us. First of all, send your tips. If you have tips for the show or questions for Amber Connor, Carol McIntosh, or Tara Starr, please send them to info@nns-network.com. Thanks again for tuning in, and see you next week.
Bye.
And Tyrone's going to play us out with another video. Thank you, Tyrone. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
For those who don't know him, this is Norman Smith, another great osprey.
Your mic is muted.
It's off.
Yeah, you see why this communication between us is so important. Like having our little tips. Yours weren't smooth enough, so we had to work on that. It's because of the camera setup. You had too much in your hands. So we need like up here.